Hello and welcome to Sports News. Super Eagles skipper Vincent Iyama has been ordered to appear before the Nigeria Football Federation's disciplinary committee next Tuesday. The Lille goalkeeper is being invited to explain his unguarded statement against the choice of Kaduna for the 2017 Africa Cup of Nations qualifying game against Chad. Meanwhile, Lazio midfielder Ogene Onazi has been fined $5,000 and ordered to produce a written apology after being sent off during a match against Chad in the Nations Cup qualifier. Nemanja Maksimovic scored an 118th minute goal on the counter-attack to give Serbia a 2-1 victory over Brazil in extra time in the FIFA Under-20 World Cup final at the North Harbour Stadium. Serbia took the lead in the 70th minute as Stanislav Mandic drifted in from the left-hand side, taking advantage of some slack defending by João Carlos to sweep home from inside the 6-yard box. The lead didn't last long though, with Brazil finding an equalizer 3 minutes later. Andreas Pereira produced a moment of individual magic to level the scores. Maksimovic wrote his name into the history books with his late strike, which came after a long, busting run with just 3 minutes remaining. Serbia, who under the former Yugoslavia Republic won the title in 1987 in Chile, is appearing in the tournament for the first time in New Zealand. Host Chile brushed aside Bolivia 5-0 at the Copa America to finish top of Group A and ensure they remain in the capital Santiago for their quarter-final game. Midfielder Charles Aranguiz scored twice, and Arsenal striker Alexis Sanchez grabbed his first goal of the tournament as Chile cruised to victory in a one-sided encounter at the National Stadium. Fullback Gary Medel added a fourth, Bolivian captain Ronald Raldez scored an own goal, and Sanchez hit the woodwork twice against a Bolivia side that offered little in the way of resistance. Chile's victory comes at the end of a difficult week dominated by news of their midfielder Arturo Vidal, who was charged with drunk driving after spending an afternoon off from the Copa drinking at a casino. While the Chileans savor their victory at the Copa America, it's bad news for Brazil, as national team skipper Neymar has now been banned for the rest of the competition following his red card against Colombia on Wednesday. A disciplinary panel of the South American Confederation has ruled that the Barcelona forward must sit out 4 games for violent conduct, ruling him out of the remainder of the competition, even if the Seleção reached the final. And that's in the sports news. I'm Ayotunde Balogun. The news at 10 continues shortly.
At least 3 people have died and dozens more injured after a man drove his car into a crowd of people who were gathered in a square in the Austrian city of Graz. The driver, a 26-year-old man, has been arrested by the police. Part of the city has been sealed off and emergency services have launched a major operation. Graz is Austria's second-largest city, and the square was hosting an event related to the nearby Austrian Formula One Grand Prix. U.S. President Barack Obama says racism remains a blight on the U.S. society. His comments follow the killing of 9 African Americans in a South Carolina church. Police are treating the killings at the church in Charleston on Wednesday night as a hate crime. Earlier, 21-year-old Dylan Roof appeared in court to face 9 murder charges. Dylan showed no emotion as relatives of the victims addressed him directly, with a daughter of one of the victims telling him, quote, "I forgive you," unquote. Speaking in San Francisco, President Obama praised the families of the victims for the forgiveness they had shown.
U.S. President Barack Obama told a gathering of the nation's mayors that racism is a blight on the nation that its citizens must address. In his speech to the U.S. Conference on Mayors in San Francisco, he told the group that it is not enough to feel sympathy for the victims of this week's shooting at a church in Charleston, South Carolina, but that the country must address the root of the problem.
The apparent motivations of the shooter remind us that racism remains a blight that we have to combat together. At some point as a country, we have to reckon with what happens. It is not good enough simply to show sympathy.
The president also used the opportunity to call for more restrictions on guns. He recounted the list of mass shootings that have plagued the country in recent years and said that if Congress had enacted gun control measures after the massacre at an elementary school in Newton, Connecticut, that some of the tragedies might have been prevented.
And the main news again. The Nigerian army has honored its troops for their gallantry in the fight against terror in Yobe State, as Governor Ibrahim Gaidam has pledged his administration's continued support for the officers and men. The group campaigning for the rescue of the Chibok girls has called attention to the plight of the internally displaced persons in Nigeria as the world marks Refugee Day. And at least 3 people died today after a man drove his car into a crowd in Austria's second largest city of Graz. That's the news at 10 for tonight. Thank you so much for being a part of it. I'm Harriet Agbini. Have a great night.